My daughter-in-law's brother told my son that I had been stealing from the family business for 11 years. He said it with documents. He said it with a spreadsheet and highlighted cells and a very convincing expression of reluctant sorrow, the kind that men practice in mirrors. What he did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had built that business from a card table in my garage in 1987 and that my name was still on every foundational patent it had ever filed. I saw my daughter standing outside the Kroger on West Haven Boulevard at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. She was not shopping. She was sitting on the concrete lip of a planter with a paper cup of coffee going cold in her hand, and her youngest asleep in the stroller beside her, and her oldest, who is 7, sitting cross-legged on the ground drawing something in a small notebook. My daughter is not a woman who sits on planters outside grocery stores. She grew up in a house with a sunroom and a garden and a proper place to sit. I knew before I rolled down my window that something had broken. I pulled into the fire lane. My daughter looked up, and the expression on her face was one I had not seen since she was 9 years old, and fell off her bicycle on the driveway and lay very still for a moment, deciding whether she was going to cry. She decided then. She decided now. I got out of the car. I did not say anything right away. I crouched down to my grandson first and looked at what he was drawing. It was a house, very detailed. He had drawn curtains in each window. "That's a good house," I said. He looked at me with his mother's eyes. "I'm drawing our house," he said, "the one we're going to have." I looked at my daughter. She shook her head once. I pushed the stroller to my car. My grandson carried his notebook. My daughter carried nothing, which told me everything, because my daughter always carries something. She is the kind of woman who has a bag for every contingency. She had nothing with her but her children and that cold cup of coffee and the particular stillness of someone who has run out of plans. "Tell me," I said. Once we were in the car, she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Then she said, his brother showed Leland documents, bank transfers, invoices. He said I had been redirecting payments from Aldercroft accounts into a personal holding company since 2021. She stopped. Leland looked at me and he said, "I don't know who you are anymore. I put the car in drive." "He said that to you." "He said it in front of his brother. In front of his father." She looked out the window. "He moved his wedding ring to his right hand, Mom. In the middle of the conversation, he just slid it off and moved it, like he was already practicing." The baby stirred in her car seat. My daughter reached back without looking and found her daughter's hand. I drove to my house. I did not take the highway because the highway would have been faster and I needed the 23 minutes on surface streets to think without anyone watching my face. My name is Winifred Oakes. I am 64 years old. I built Aldercroft Medical Instruments from a prototype I developed in my kitchen after my husband died of a condition that might have been caught earlier if the diagnostic equipment available in 1987 had been better. His name was Theodore. He was 41. My daughter was 3. I had a master's in biomedical engineering and $8,000 in savings and a very specific kind of grief that had no interest in staying quiet. I spent 4 years developing the first Aldercroft sensor array in my garage in borrowed lab space at the university, in the kitchen after my daughter was asleep. I filed the first patent in 1991. I sold the first unit to a hospital in Nashville in 1993. By 2005, Aldercroft Medical Instruments had 42 employees and contracts with hospital systems in 17 states. By 2015, we had been acquired by a larger group called Solveris Health, and I had retained a seat on the board and a licensing arrangement that paid me royalties on every unit bearing the foundational patents I had filed between 1991 and 2003. Those patents were still mine. That licensing arrangement was still active. And the documents my daughter's brother-in-law had presented to my son-in-law as evidence of fraud were. I had a strong suspicion, not what they appeared to be. I did not say any of this in the car. I said, "Are you hungry?" She said, "No." I said, "The children are." She said, "Yes, probably." When we got to my house, I put my grandson in charge of selecting a movie which gave him purpose and kept him occupied. The baby woke up and looked around my living room with the frank assessment of a person who has just arrived somewhere and is deciding whether to approve. I gave her a wooden spoon to hold. She approved. My daughter sat at my kitchen table. I made her eat something, toast with butter, half an avocado, the same things I had made her eat at 3 in the morning when she was studying for her MCATs and had convinced herself she had forgotten everything she knew. She had not forgotten anything then. She was not wrong now. "Walk me through the documents," I said. She described them. Transfers from the Aldercroft operating account to something called Winhaven Capital Group. Invoices for consulting services rendered by Winhaven Capital Group. 11 transactions over 3 years. The total across all of them was $340,000. I listened without expression. Then I set up Winhaven Capital Group. She looked at me. "What?" The holding company they're accusing you of using. Who incorporated it? I don't know. I assume. She stopped. They showed it to Leland as mine. They said my name was on it. Was your name on the documents they showed him? Or did they tell him your name was on the documents they showed him? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she said. I didn't see the documents. Leland described them to me. I stood up and went to my study. My attorney, a woman named Gretchen Suh, answered on the second ring. I had worked with Gretchen for 16 years. She had a manner on the phone that made every call feel like the most important thing she had attended to all day, which I had always appreciated. I need you tomorrow morning, I said. Early. Bring whatever we have on Aldercroft, the licensing agreements, the original patent filings, and anything in your files about Solveris's internal restructuring since 2019. A pause. This is about the Aldercroft situation. It is. I've been following it, she said. There were changes made to the subsidiary structure last spring that I flagged at the time and sent you a note about. I remember. I'll be there at 7. I went back to the kitchen. My daughter had finished the toast. She was watching her son through the window. He had gone into the backyard with my dog, who is old and slow and deeply committed to following children wherever they go. He set this up, my daughter said. Leland's brother, he's been waiting for a reason to push me out. Tell me what you know about him. Her brother-in-law's name was Reston. He had joined Aldercroft's executive team in 2022 after the Solveris acquisition restructured the leadership. He had an MBA from a school he mentioned often. He had an assistant he treated poorly and a habit of taking credit in rooms that contained people who didn't know better. He had never liked my daughter. My daughter had always been careful not to say so directly, but I had seen it at family dinners at the company holiday party 2 years ago, in the particular way he said her name, with a slight wait at the end, like a door closing. Has he ever had access to the Aldercroft financial systems? I asked. He runs the subsidiary accounts, she said. He restructured them last year. He said it was for efficiency. I nodded. I did not say what I was thinking. What I was thinking was this. I had received a note from Gretchen in March, 8 months ago, about an anomaly in the subsidiary filing structure under Solveris. A new LLC had appeared in the chain. She had flagged it as unusual. I had been in the middle of another matter and had told her to keep an eye on it. I had not followed up as quickly as I should have. That was on me. But the name of that LLC had stayed in my memory the way small things sometimes do when the mind recognizes something it can't yet name. Windhaven Capital Group. I went back to my study and opened my email, found Gretchen's note from March. Read it again. The LLC had been incorporated in Delaware in February of last year. The registered agent was a firm that Reston's personal attorney also used. It was not my daughter's name on those documents. It was never have been my daughter's name on those documents. Gretchen arrived at 6:52. She sat across from me at the kitchen table while my daughter slept upstairs and my grandson ate cereal and explained to the dog why dogs could not eat cereal, a conversation the dog received with great patience. Gretchen spread the documents across the table. Walk me through what they have, she said. I told her. She listened. She did not make notes right away, which meant she was thinking. The original patent licensing agreement, she said, runs through 2031. The royalty structure is iron. Solveris cannot restructure those payments without your explicit written consent, which you have not given. And you have never had any involvement with Windhaven Capital Group. I have never heard of Windhaven Capital Group until my daughter described it to me yesterday. Gretchen looked at the LLC filing she had pulled. She compared the registration date to a Solveris internal memo she had in her files. Look, this LLC was incorporated 5 days after Reston joined the executive, she said. And the registered agent appears in 2 other LLs that are nested in the Solveris subsidiary chain. She turned the document toward me. This was constructed to receive money and to look like someone else did it. Yes, that someone being your daughter. That was the plan, I believe. Frame her, remove her, discredit her before she could raise questions about where the money actually went. Gretchen wrote something on her legal pad. How long has the money been moving? 11 transactions over 3 years, $340,000 total. She was quiet for a moment. And he showed these documents to your son-in-law? Yes. Leland believed them. Gretchen looked at her legal pad. Are constructed, forensic accountant 2 days maximum, given the paper trail on the LLC registration. That gives you the fraud case. She paused, but the marriage. That's my daughter's decision, I said. My job is to make sure she has the truth in her hands. What she does with it after is hers. Gretchen nodded. She understood. My daughter came downstairs at 9. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the 2 of us and then at the documents spread across the table and then at her son who waved at her with his spoon. Come sit down, I said. She sat. Gretchen walked her through it carefully. The LLC, the registration date, The registered agent, the paper trail that did not lead to my daughter but led very clearly and documentably somewhere else. My daughters listened without speaking. Her hands were flat on the table. When Gretchen finished, my daughter said, "He built this for 3 years. It appears so. Yes, he was building this while he was coming to our house for Thanksgiving," she said it very quietly, "while he was asking me to recommend him for that board committee." Yes, she was still for a moment. Then something in her face changed, not the hollowed-out stillness of the day before, something with more steel in it. "What do we do?" she said. Gretchen looked at her legal pad. "We have a certified forensic accountant examine the documents and file an affidavit with findings. I contact Solveris's board directly with documented evidence of internal fraud. Given the licensing structure and your mother's retained IP rights, Solveris is highly motivated to cooperate because the alternative is a licensing dispute that would cost them significantly more than $340,000. And we request that the original documents shown to your husband be produced, at which point we demonstrate that your name appears on them through methods that a forensic document examiner will identify in under an hour." My daughter looked at me. "How long?" 8 days, I said, "possibly less." She nodded once. "All right." The forensic accountant was a man named Cecil Wharton who had worked with my legal team before. He was precise and efficient and had a manner of presenting findings that made complicated financial structures simple enough for any jury to understand, which was useful even when there was no jury, because juries are who Reston would eventually need to worry about. Cecil had his affidavit in 4 days. The summary was 7 pages. The conclusion was not ambiguous. While Cecil worked, I made 2 calls. The first was to a woman I will call by her first name only, which is Petra, because she has asked for privacy and she has earned it. Petra had been a project manager at Aldercroft from 2019 to 2022. She had left under circumstances she described to mutual colleagues as a difference in professional values, which was a careful way of saying she had watched Reston take credit for her work in a meeting with the Solveris board, and had decided she was not willing to continue working in an environment where that was possible. I had met Petra once at an Aldercroft event and had liked her immediately. She answered my call with the wariness of someone who has learned that calls from the past are not always welcome. I introduced myself. I told her what I was looking into. I told her my daughter was involved. There was a pause. "He did the same thing to a colleague of mine in 2021, she said. Redirected a grant payment through a subsidiary and let the documentation fall on someone else. That person left the company. It was never investigated because nobody could get the files." "Do you still have anything from that period?" Another pause. "Longer. I kept copies of everything I worked on. I didn't know why at the time, I just knew I should." "Would you be willing to speak with my attorney?" "Yes," she said. "I've been willing for 3 years." The second call was to the chair of Solveris's audit committee, a woman named Dr. Constance, I will use only her title and first name, who had known me since the early Aldercroft days. "We had sat on a hospital foundation board together for 6 years, she answered immediately. "Winifred," she said, "I've been expecting your call. You knew I had suspicions 2 months ago. Nothing I could bring forward yet." She paused. "Is this about the subsidiary restructuring?" "It's about $340,000 in LLC, and a very deliberate attempt to frame my daughter." Silence. Then, "Send me what you have." I sent her what I had. She reviewed it that afternoon and called me back at 7 p.m. "I'm calling an emergency audit committee meeting for Thursday," she said. "I'd like your attorney present. She'll be there." Solveris hosted a quarterly investor update every 3 months, a formal presentation to shareholders and institutional partners held in the company's conference facility on the 22nd floor of a building in downtown Charlotte. Reston was scheduled to present the subsidiary performance report. He had presented it every quarter for 2 years. He was comfortable at that podium. He had, I suspected, designed the presentation to make himself appear indispensable. The emergency audit committee meeting happened on Thursday, 2 days before the quarterly presentation. Reston was not informed of the meeting's purpose. He was told it was a routine alignment session. He sat across a conference table from Gretchen, from Cecil, from Dr. Constance, and from 2 members of Solveris's board. He had his assistant with him, which told me he still believed he controlled the room. Gretchen walked through the affidavit. Cecil walked through the forensic accounting, the registered agent connection, the timeline, the 5 days between Reston's hire date and the LLC incorporation, the redirected payments, the documents that had been shown to son-in-law, now analyzed by a document examiner who found evidence of selective editing in the metadata. Reston said very little. His attorney, who had been called in at some point between our arrival and the meeting starting, said somewhat more. It did not help. Dr. Constance looked at Reston for a long moment. Then she looked at his attorney. I'll need your client's access credentials suspended by end of business today, she said, and we'll be in touch about next steps. My daughter was not in that meeting. She was at my house with her children. I had told her I would call her when it was done. I called her from the lobby. It's over, she said. The meeting is over, I said. The legal process is beginning, which is different. But they have everything. It's documented. It's not going to disappear. A long pause. He took 3 years to build this, she said. 3 years, and he was wrong about one thing. He was wrong about a number of things, I said. He thought I had no one behind me. He thought that if he got Leland to turn on me, I would be alone. She stopped. He didn't know about you. I stood in the lobby of that building and let myself feel that for a moment. No, I said. He didn't. My son-in-law is a man I will not judge here because he is not the subject of this story, and because the process of being deceived by someone you trust is more complicated than it looks from the outside. What I will say is that he sat at my kitchen table 2 days after the audit committee meeting with the document examiner's report in front of him, and he read it, and he did not say anything for a long time. Then he said to my daughter, I looked at your face when he showed me those papers. You told me you had no idea what they were, and I chose to believe the papers over your face. He put the report down. I don't know if you can forgive that. My daughter looked at him. I don't know yet either, she said. I stood in the doorway of my kitchen and did not enter the room. That conversation belonged to them. The quarterly presentation happened without Reston. A Solverus board representative presented in his place and offered no explanation beyond a personnel update pending review. The shareholders in that room had questions. The board representative did not answer them in ways that satisfied anyone. By the following week, 2 financial journalists had been in contact with Gretchen's office. The documents were already with the SEC. Petra's testimony about the 2021 incident opened an additional thread of investigation that I was not the primary party to and will not describe in detail here, other than to say that it confirmed what I had suspected, which was that my daughter was not the first person Reston had tried to use this way, and that the earlier incident had been successful because the person involved had not had someone like Gretchen, or someone like Cecil, or someone who had been watching the Aldercroft structure for 37 years and knew exactly where every body was buried, not literally, but professionally, which in a corporation amounts to the same thing. 2 months after the meeting in Charlotte, I sat in the office of a woman named Dr. Aurelia Finch, who ran a nonprofit legal clinic in Mecklenburg County that provided free legal representation to women navigating financial fraud in domestic and workplace settings. I had found her through a colleague and had spent 40 minutes on the phone with her the previous week, understanding the scope of what she did and where the gaps were. I wrote a check from the Oaks Family Foundation, which I had established in 2016, and which had previously supported biomedical research fellowships and STEM education programs for girls. Check was for $175,000. It would fund the clinic's fraud investigation support program for 2 years. Finch looked at the check and then at me. Is this personal? She asked. Professionally, I said. I have spent 30 years building things that are difficult to take apart. Personally, I spent 11 days watching my daughter believe she had no ground to stand on. I folded my hands on her desk. I'd like fewer women to spend 11 days believing that my daughter was with me. She had come back to work, not at Aldercroft, which she had resigned from cleanly and without drama, but at Oaks Bio Foundation, a consulting and licensing arm I had been running quietly for several years, and which had room for someone with her background and more than enough work to fill it. She was good. She had always been good. She had spent 3 years in an environment that was systematically telling her otherwise, and it had done some damage, the kind you can't see immediately but that shows up in small ways, in the hesitation before she speaks in meetings, in the double-checking and triple-checking of things she should be confident about. It would take time. I knew that. She was sitting beside me in Dr. Finch's office. When I was done speaking, she said, the thing he did that was hardest to explain afterward was very quiet. He would ask me, in front of Leland, if I was sure about things, not aggressively. Just, are you sure about that number? Are you sure you sent that email? It was such a small thing, it sounds like nothing. She paused. But after 2 years of it, I wasn't sure of anything. Dr. Finch was writing something down. She looked up. That's one of the hardest things to document, she said, and one of the most damaging. My daughter nodded. I know that now. I didn't have words for it while it was happening. The criminal referral was filed in October. I will not tell you it moved quickly because it did not, and I will not tell you that the wheels of accountability are swift because they are not. What I will tell you is that they moved, which is more than I could have said 11 days after I found my daughter on a planter outside a grocery store with cold coffee in her hand and no plan left. On a Wednesday morning in November, I drove to that Kroger on West Haven Boulevard. I parked in the space closest to the front entrance and I sat in my car for a few minutes. The planter was there. It had a small ornamental tree in it, the kind that goes orange and red in the fall, and it had gone orange and red. A woman walked past it with a cart full of groceries and a child hanging off the side of the cart making airplane sounds with his arms, and she did not look at the planter because it was just a planter. I thought about my daughter sitting on the edge of that concrete with nothing left, and her son drawing a house with curtains in the windows because he was 7, and he needed to believe he was going to have a house. Then I thought about where she was this morning. In her office at the Bio Foundation, on a call with a hospital system in Denver about a licensing arrangement for a diagnostic tool we had been developing for 2 years. Doing the work, sure of the numbers. I sat there until I was finished sitting there. Then I got out and went to buy groceries because we were out of coffee and I had been meaning to get more for 3 days and had kept forgetting. On the way home, I called my daughter. "How did Denver go?" I said. "Really well," she said. I could hear something in her voice that had not been there in a long time. The weight of a woman who knows what she is doing. "They want to move forward." "Good," I said. "That's good. There are women in your life right now who have been so carefully and consistently doubted that they have started doing it to themselves. They second-guess the things they know. They apologize for things they haven't done wrong. They stay because leaving requires being certain, and certainty is the first thing that gets taken. I know because I watched it happen to someone I would do anything for, in slow motion. Over 3 years, I was not watching closely enough. I am watching now. If something in this story sounds like your life, or someone else's life, or a life you are afraid someone you love is living, please reach out to a person you trust, to an attorney, to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is available any hour of any day. You are not overreacting, you are not too sensitive. You are paying attention, and your attention is exactly right. This is Topaz Revenge. We don't just recover, we rebuild.